Molly Whuppie. Once upon a time, a man and a wife had too many children, and they could not find enough food for them all, so they took 3 lassies, the 3 youngest girls, and left them in a wood with just one small biscuit apiece to live on. The eldest sister had lovely hair and a beautiful face, and the middle sister had a graceful neck and hands and a beautiful face. Molly Whuppie was the youngest, but she had the most beautiful heart of all 3, and was very clever, very smart, and the boldest and bravest of all. Molly and her sisters walked and walked without ever seeing a house. Their sisters were so hungry that they quickly ate their biscuits, but Molly waited to eat hers. They came upon a starving wild cat that was nearly dead, but Molly broke off half her biscuit and set it beside the cat's nose and went on. A little farther along they saw a wolf so weak from lack of food that it might have died shortly after, but Molly gave the wolf the other half of her biscuit, and on she and her sisters walked. It kept getting darker, and they kept getting hungrier, until at last they saw a light and rushed toward it, and it turned out to be a cave, with rocks piled out front like walls, and through an open place left for a window, they saw the light they had followed was a burning root from an oak tree that grew high above the cave. They saw a dead tree against an open place in the rocks to make a door, and when they knocked, an ugly old woman came, wearing a tall, pointy black hat, with a wide, round brim, and in a creaky voice she asked, "What do you want?" "Please," said Molly, "please let us in and give us something to eat."
"Be careful what you ask for," said the woman. "My husband is a giant ogre, and he would kill you and eat you if he comes home."
"Please," Molly begged, "just let us stay for a little while, and then we will go away before he comes." So the woman let them in and set them down before the fire, and gave them warm water to drink and walnuts with a rock to crack them open. But just as they had begun to eat, the door slammed open, and a terrible, dreadful voice called out,
"Fum, fee, fo, fi! I smell something yummy close by. Who have you there with you, wife?"
"Oh," said the wife,
"It's 3 poor lassies, cold and hungry, and they will go away soon."
The giant ogre said nothing, but ate up a big supper of roasted goblin with cobra snakes for dessert, and he used a flat dragon ear for a plate and a dragon's pointy tail for a fork. And when he had finished, he ordered them to stay all night. Now he had 3 dirty daughters of his own, who kept sticky porcupines and stinky skunks like kitty cats, and ate pine cones like cookies, and chewed beetles like gumdrops. And he said his 3 daughters were to sleep in the same bed as Molly and her sisters. Molly noticed that before they went to bed, the wife of the giant ogre whispered in his ear, and then he winked at his wife and rubbed the shiny spot at the end of his nose, and then he put straw ropes like necklaces around Molly's neck and her sisters' necks, and round his own daughters' necks he put gold chains. So Molly was careful and did not fall asleep, but waited till she was sure everyone was sleeping sound. Then she slipped out of the bed and took the straw ropes off her own and her sisters' necks, and took the gold chains from the giant's daughters. Then she put the straw ropes on the giant's lassies and the gold chains on herself and her sisters, and lay down. Then, in the middle of the night, when it was much too dark to see, up rose the giant, armed with a great knobby, bumpy club, and he felt for the necks with the straw. He jerked his own lassies out of bed down to the floor and battered them until they were dead, and then lay down again, thinking that he had managed just fine. Molly thought it time she and her sisters left that place, so she wakened them and told them to be quiet, and they slipped out of the cave. They all got out safe, and they ran and never stopped until they came to a deep river that was partly covered with ice, but not enough to walk on, and she saw fish swimming under the thin ice and turtles walking on it. Then Molly spied some little vines that had wound tight together like a girl's braid of hair, about as big around as 3 little fingers wrapped together, and this braid of vines stretched all the way across the river. Molly balanced herself very carefully and very gracefully on the vine, and showed her sisters how to walk across it like a bridge. So they crossed, and then walked on till morning, when they saw a wonderful, splendid palace before them. It turned out to be a king's palace, so Molly went in and told her story to the king. He said, "Well, Molly, you are a clever girl with a beautiful heart, and you have managed well. But if you would like to manage better, you should return to the giant's cave and steal back my great silver sword that the giant stole from me and hangs on the back of his bed. If you can, I will give your eldest sister my eldest son to marry." Molly said she would try. So she went back and managed to sneak into the giant's cave and crept in and hid below the bed. The giant came home and ate up a great big supper of baked troll pie with a sheep's head and pig's tails for dessert, and got sleepy and went to bed. Molly waited until he was snoring, and she crept out and quietly reached up over the giant's head and carefully got down the silver sword. But just as she pulled it off the wall, it gave a rattle, and up jumped the giant, and Molly ran out the door carrying the silver sword with her, and she ran, and he ran, till they came to the bridge of braided vines, and she was small enough that she got over, but he couldn't, and he ripped up the vine bridge and threw it away and roared out, "You're in trouble now, Molly Whuppie! Don't you dare ever come back again!" And she said, "Maybe so, maybe not, and maybe twice more, you brute. I'll come again." So Molly brought the silver sword and presented it to the king, and her eldest sister, with the lovely hair and beautiful face, was married to his eldest son. The king said, "You've managed well, Molly, you great-hearted girl, but if you would like to manage even better, steal back for me my golden money bag that the giant stole and keeps under his pillow. If you succeed, I'll marry your second sister to my second son." Molly said she would try. So she went back again. She couldn't cross on the vine bridge because the giant had ripped it out, but now thin ice covered the whole river enough for her to cross over to the giant's cave, and she slipped in and hid again below the bed, and waited till the giant had eaten his supper of fried dwarf with black bats and white snakes for dessert. Then he rubbed his scabby hand across his nose where there was something sparkly on it, and went to bed and soon was snoring. Then Molly sneaked out and very carefully slid her hand beneath the pillow and eased out the golden money bag. But just as she was tiptoeing away, the giant wakened and ran after her, and she ran, and he ran, till they came to the river, and he yelled out, "I've got you now, Molly! There's no bridge of vines to cross over!" He didn't know she was small and light enough to cross on the thin ice over the river, but he couldn't, and when he saw her cross over, he threw down heavy rocks and broke all the ice, and he roared, "You're in trouble now, Molly Whuppie! Don't you dare ever come back again!" And she said, "Maybe so, maybe not, maybe once more, you brute, I'll come again." So Molly brought the golden money bag to present to the king, and he ordered a big wedding for her second sister with the beautiful face and graceful neck and hands to marry the king's second best son. After that the king said, "Molly, you are a very clever lass, with the most wonderful heart I've ever seen, but if you would like to manage best of all, steal back for me my diamond pin that the giant stole and wears stuck in his nose. If you succeed, I'll give you my youngest and most favorite son for yourself." Molly said she would try. So back she went as far as the river, but the vine bridge still was ripped out, and the ice all broken. But then she saw the turtles swimming in among the broken pieces of ice, and she nimbly and gracefully hopped from one turtle's back to the other until she crossed over the river. Then she went on to the giant's cave and hid herself below the bed. The giant came home, ate a great enormously huge supper of stewed dwarf with alligator snouts and dragon wings and dinosaur eggs for dessert, and then burped a terrifically loud burp and didn't say excuse me because he was such a rude ogre without any manners, and then scratched the end of his nose all around the pin, went to bed, and shortly was snoring louder than a thunderstorm. Molly crept out, took a deep breath to calm herself, then slowly reached over and grabbed the sparkly diamond pin on the end of the giant's rough, scabby nose, and she pulled and heaved and twisted, but just as she pulled it free, the giant snatched her by her other hand, and he roared, "Now I have catched you, Molly Whuppie, and if I had done as much bad to you as you have done to me, how would you punish me?" Molly hid the nose pin behind her back and thought a minute and said, "I would put you into a sack, and then I'd put a wolf inside with you, and a wildcat beside you, and a needle and thread and scissors, and I'd hang you up on the wall, and I'd go to the forest and choose the thickest, crookedest stick I could get, and I would come home and take you down and bang you till you were dead."
"Well, Molly," said the giant, "that's just what I'll do to you."
So he grabbed a sack and jammed Molly into it, and stuffed the wolf and the wildcat beside her, and a needle and thread and scissors, and hung her up on the wall, and went to the wood to choose a fat, crooked stick, leaving his pointy-hatted wife there to make sure Molly didn't escape. From inside the sack, Molly sang out, "Oh, if only you could see what I see!"
"Well," said the giant's wife, "whatever is it that you see, Molly?"
But Molly never said a word except, "Oh, if you could only see what I see!" The giant's wife begged Molly to let her climb up into the sack so she could see what Molly saw. So, from inside, Molly took the scissors and cut a hole in the sack, and sneaked out the needle and thread with her, and jumped down and helped the giant's wife up into the sack, and then Molly sewed up the hole. The giant's wife saw nothing, and began to ask to get down again, but Molly never paid any attention, only hid herself behind the stove. Home came the giant, lugging a great, big, crooked tree trunk in his hand, and he took down the sack and began to beat and batter it. His wife cried out, "It's me, you dummy!" But the wolf howled, and the wildcat shrieked, and the giant couldn't tell it was his wife's voice. While he was battering the sack with the crooked tree trunk, Molly rushed out from behind the stove, and the giant saw her, and he raced after her as fast as he could be, and reached out his giant arm and almost snatched her, but she was quicker and got to the river. Only the turtles were all gone, and she couldn't cross on their backs. But then she spied some big fish slowly swimming just barely under the water, and she was so nimble and graceful, she crossed by stepping over on the fishes' backs. "Why don't you come after me?" Molly called to him. "Even a little girl can splash across. You might want to catch me, you brute, but never more will I ever come again."
"You're in trouble now, Molly Whuppie," he roared,
and raced after her, but he was so heavy he sank deep in the river mud and drowned, and never ever bothered anyone ever again. So Molly took the diamond pin to the king, and he was so happy and was so proud of her wonderful heart that he gave her the biggest wedding of all and married her to his youngest and most favorite son. And she and her sisters and the king's sons all lived happily ever after.